You've found your way to the Winning Tactics podcast with host Adam Sinkus. Adam discusses winning tactics with small business owners and entrepreneurs, uncovering processes and introducing the tools and solutions for enhancing the bottom line. Thanks again for finding your way to the Winning Tactics podcast, and now your host, Adam Sinkus.
Good afternoon, LinkedIn, Facebook friends. Welcome back to another wonderful episode of the Winning Tactics podcast. Before we jump into my guest, Andrew, today, I'd like to thank my affiliate partner, Spearpoint Solutions. They are offering a killer 12-month subscription that is filled with all kinds of business strategies. In fact, you get 3 of them a month. Super good deal at $3,500 for the year. Really, honestly, it's you could pay $30,000 a month for the types of strategies that they're putting out in those email subscriptions. Check it out today, spearpointonline.com. Use offer code EAC1019 for substantial savings. All right, Andrew, welcome to the show. So glad to have you on today. Tell us who you are and what you do.
I'm Andrew Deutsch from Fangled Tech. We're a full-service marketing and sales consultancy, not an agency. And our role in this world is to teach companies how to turn every touch into a voracious advocate for their brand.
Awesome. So glad to have you today. We are going to dive down why you need to talk about strategy before you just dive into tools. And I teased this yesterday a bit on LinkedIn with the cold pitch, right? We get so many of those, but it's here, check out my tool, buy my tool, get my tool. It's going to save your business. And most of the time that tool is something that either I already have and I'm very happy with, or doesn't even apply to my business. So let's talk about that a little bit, because I think sales is a big place where we get that really big push for tools, and I think it's a great opportunity. So, what has been your experience with that?
Well, the typical pitch that most people get sounds like this: I want to help your business. We can build you the most beautiful website you ever saw. We can drive 100,000 people to that website every day. We can get you hundreds of leads that you can follow up on. We can set you up with a CRM that'll do amazing things. And then at the end of the entire pitch, where they've sold all the stuff, somebody goes, well, you don't know anything about my business, who my customers are, and what benefits me. You could be in a niche market where there's only 1,000 total customers in the whole world who would ever do business with you. So a fancy website that could drive 100,000 people to you is not necessarily functional. So, any strategy, especially in a small business where every penny has even more impact on your bottom line than in much bigger organizations, being able to truly build that strategy before you go to the toolbox is really where it's at.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. You mentioned websites, and that is part of my business outreach as well, is building some of those beautiful websites that drive all that traffic. But the reality is that most people already have a website up, and it's not always the website that's the problem.
Right.
That's the pitch we always get. So, I think you're spot on with that. You need to know what the business does before you talk any of that.
Yeah, it's if you were planning on building a house, and someone came to you and said, we've got the most incredible windows and siding that you could possibly want for your house, and wants to sign a deal, you'd go, well, you're nuts. I don't even know what shape the house is going to be. I don't know what kind of windows. I don't know what size the windows are. And that's really, it's an exaggeration, but it's really true. Mm-hmm. And the other reason that you want to get strategic, especially in this small business space, is most likely you're going to market with other folks who are more established or other folks that do what you do in a different way. So if you can take the time to do the analysis to build your strategy, to truly understand your customer and what needs aren't being met, you certainly can target much better and talk about your business in the way that they want to hear, not the way you want to speak.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. In my experience, definitely falls in the marketing vertical as well, and especially in websites. You can get a web page for, there's people locking them for $50 a month up to as much money as you could possibly ever want to spend on a website, and everything in between. And I always find it interesting when you see a post about somebody asks a general question about a website, and then all of a sudden all these like bottom dollar chasing the lowest market price they can possibly give for a website. There's 700 marketers that have all posted on this. And it's not just marketing, it's every industry has this group. I call out marketing because that's the world I'm familiar with in it. But the one thing that's common that I see with all of those is it's, here, I do this and I can do it for $500. There's no ask about what they need from a website, what they're trying to accomplish, what they're trying to do. There's no ask. It's just this cram.
Yeah. And why would you build a website if you don't know who that customer is? You don't know what that customer's problems are. What are the challenges they have? What language they speak? And I don't mean Spanish, English, Portuguese. I mean the tone and everything within the realm.
Yep.
All of that comes after you know what's there. So really the conversation is, how do you know your customer, and how do you really understand, listen to what are their needs, what are the pains that you can solve, and how your product, your company, your service can differentiate in a way to speak to those problems. Everybody loves to get their problems solved and have their challenges resolved. And a great example is, there are companies out there that you're competing against. I don't know, let's say you're a window installer, and everybody out there says, God, I hate calling window people because it's always a high pressure sell. There's always a gimmick, and there's no guarantee they're not going to trash my house. That's what the consumer thinks. But you go online talking about, we have the best glass, we're fully insulated, all of these features that exist in the window world. Everybody has that.
Yep.
There's slight differences, but at the end of the day, a window's a window, depending on which class you're buying. What the customer's really looking for is somebody who's going to come out to the house and isn't going to strong arm them, who isn't going to trick them into a gimmick and otherwise. So knowing that your customer has all of these fears, you then can build a marketing strategy around that personal touch, customer service, the feeling that it's a family member who's coming to help you. It's not some big corporation who's got high pressure salespeople, just as an example. And as you build that persona, you understand who those people are, and there may be more than one, you then can build your website around people feeling that, rather than people going, here's another guy going to try to trick me into buying windows. So, it really, without being able to build a strategy, and to build a strategy, you really have to know that customer. You could be spinning your wheels for a very long time wondering, nobody wants to do business with you.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. You keep going back to the customer piece, right? And customer, in my mind, is two different pieces, right? So I have my customer, which is the person I'm trying to sell this to, or my potential customer. And then they have their customers, which ultimately I'm trying to sell my thing, my product or my service to their customers if I'm in the space, or, so you have to, I think it's interesting in differentiating what customer really means, right? And what's your understanding of customer in the realm of B2B versus B2C?
Well, it's more broad than that, because depending in the industrial space, in the B2B market, you imagine that you're a guy in the industry who makes an adhesive tape that's used to assemble a component that gets put into a sub-assembly that becomes a component of a vehicle that then is a car. So in that case, you're a tier 4, tier 5, meaning distance from the actual product. There's multiple customers along that path that you're going to be selling to. If you're in the industrial space, imagine that you manufacture, let's say, precision screws. So in that market space, you could be that guy that we just described. You could be a guy who sells to distributors, who then the distributors have an end customer. And you could also be a company that sells to that end user that can do the volume. So there's different complexities depending on who that customer is. Imagine you're in the business of selling carriers for pickup trucks. You know, you make the racks that go on the back for carpenters to be able to put ladders. Again, are you selling to people who do construction? Are you selling to a distributor, or are you selling to places that sell and install? So that's one of the questions of who your customer is also where is your customer and where are you in that chain? In the direct to consumer business, you know who your customer is.
Yep.
If you're a guy who's got an incredible product that you've got a website and you sell on eBay and Amazon, it's a much simpler situation. But now, who are your different customers? Say you're a pharmaceutical house. You make a cream that's used for diaper rash, acne, and chafing for people on bicycles, which is actually a client that we're working with. So how do you message so that you can appeal to the needs of moms that are and moms and dads that are taking care of babies and athletes and otherwise, so understanding who those are is key. And the reality is most small businesses fail when they're only selling the features of their product.
Yes.
Take for example a diaper rash cream. What are you actually selling? Are you selling zinc oxide or whatever the ingredients are, or are you selling the ability for a mother to know she's doing the best for her child? Are you selling that one thing that she can use to get her mother-in-law off her back? Are you selling a good night's sleep? What are you actually selling?
Yeah.
So all of that comes into that factor of, you know, are you going to buy a car because it's made of steel, has 4 tires and a windshield? Or are you going to buy a car that when you look at it gives you a special feeling? And when you hit the gas pedal, it puts you back in the seat. Or as a father with 7 children, buying safe transportation for your family, what is your motive for buying it? That's the understanding of your customer. And until you do that, you can't do anything else unless you just want to throw money in a hole.
Well, you know, some people like to do that, but you know, I ask the question all the time. It's one of the first questions I ask when I get on an engagement. Is I literally ask who are or is your ideal customer, and I would say probably 50 to 60% of the time, I get an answer that's like everybody. Well, everybody.
Anybody's got money. Yeah.
Anybody that's got money. Anybody with 2 legs, 2 arms that can walk into my store. Okay, so who do you primarily sell to? Well, women. Okay, now we're getting somewhere.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on how businesses should approach identifying their ideal customer?
There's quite a bit to it. The first thing that I usually ask is what you just did. And as they start defining, we interrupt and we go, okay, but who don't you want to sell to? What's not your customer? Who would never want to do business with you? And that usually changes the thought process in a way that clarifies the first. You know, for example, if you made a product that only appeals to women, then you don't want to sell to men. But the question is there a reason to appeal to men so the women would want to buy it? And the other way around. But it's quite a thought process. And the other thing that's a mistake is to think that there's only one category of customer, one persona. Many companies have multiples. For example, furniture store is a great place. So you've got customers coming into the furniture store. And let's just stick with the typical female persona. So you'll have a woman that comes in that in her mindset is what we might call the sort of the antique female stereotype. I like to look at pretty things, but my husband is in charge, and unless he approves, he holds the money. And then the other woman who arrives is your professional. If I like it, She's a modern woman. If I like it, I'm going to buy it and we're going to bring it home.
Yep.
So now you as the salesperson who's dealing, or you're building the marketing strategy for those two, you know that if type A comes in, the conversation's about, let's look at beautiful things and when can we schedule an appointment so that you bring your husband in. And the other is, let's find what you want and get it to your house. So you've got two very different personas in that same market space. So once you start to define who those are, and then if you're a high-end furniture store, who don't you want to sell to? The price guy.
Mm-hmm.
You walk into your store, you got a $3,000 sofa. No human being on the planet would buy one of those. Well, the chances of selling that guy, or that guy actually interrupting a positive sale that's happening in your store, you may not want to say things that appeal to that person to come in.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I would say probably the first 20% of my sales presentation is about disqualifying customers right off the bat.
Yep.
And I call it a sales presentation, but like you, I approach sales very conversationally and relationship driven. So, so I wouldn't say there's a formal strategy or approach to it. There's things I do, but at the end of the day, I want to disqualify people before I even try and take that approach on qualifying them for one of my tier of products.
Yeah. A great sign when you walk into a store to know that they really don't have the right training for their people is when they greet you with just, how are you today? Because there's nothing from that response that's going to help them do their job. Now, a great question when someone walks in the store, is this your first time in our store?
Mm-hmm.
What do you learn from that?
Yep.
Quite a bit.
My favorite question to ask to people that I've already had an interaction with is what's new and exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yep.
And it drives a whole different emotion in the conversation and the approach and the feeling.
Yep. So when you start looking at those personas and you start to discover what are the challenges this person's trying to resolve with the product that's going on. Someone comes to you and says, I'm looking to build a website. Great. What are the challenges that your company's got that we might be able to fix with a website? Do you have difficulty with closing? Do you have difficulty bringing people to the site? Are you getting the right people? Are the leads coming off? Are you getting all of those things are what you want to know so that then you can design something that's going to meet that need. I listen to this all the time and it drives me nuts. Everyone hates to be sold, or I don't want to do that in a salesy sort of way. And I go, people love to be sold. They hate to be pressured. They hate to be closed. They hate to be misled. None of those things are really sales. Sales starts at the investigation phase of learning, asking, meeting, getting to know, asking those probing questions and understanding exactly who that person is. What are their needs? What are their wants? What are their pains? And then finding something that you can do differently and better than anyone else to meet that need. And who doesn't like their problems to be solved?
Yeah.
That's
my answer to that is always, I just approach it from I'm here to solve their problems, whether it's me, whether it's somebody else that I know in my network. I'm going to solve a problem for them today.
Yeah.
And so, that I don't call it sales. I call it problem solving. That's my mindset, internal mindset to approach it.
Yeah. Yeah. But I call it sales because it is.
But it is.
But
I don't like.
But I refuse to let people tell me that nobody wants to be sold. It's nobody wants to be pressured or treated in a way that's uncomfortable for them. But if you're truly a salesperson, you meet them at their model of the world and you understand that model and bring them towards where they need to be to resolve the problems and challenges they have.
Yeah, I think we have this fallacy that the, so to speak, the door-to-door salesman and the used car salesman have set this precedent in our mind, and it's the people, there's the people that are cold pitching on the social platforms and things like that are the modern door-to-door and used car salesmen in my mind, that have set this stage that sales is a really negative thing.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I don't buy into it. I recognize that there are people who say they're salespeople, that aren't and ruin the name for it. But I won't back down from the fact that a quality, good, trained, skillful salesperson does great things for people.
Yeah.
It's, there's a fellow on the internet who drives me nuts. He's one of these LinkedIn supposed influencers. And he's constantly saying, in sales, there's no second place. And I always respond the same thing. If you're selling a very high dollar item that once the person makes the purchase, they're not buying again for 20 years, maybe. But in that industrial space and in the consumer space where people are buying again and again, second place, being second supplier to a company that can never run out is a great place to be. There's the expression, I think you read my article about the camel's nose under the tent.
Yeah.
Once the camel gets his nose under the tent, the rest of the camel's coming. So imagine, I can think of a time when we were in the packaging industry. So customers said, well, we're 100%, and it was our competitor. And I said, so when the day comes that they can't supply you, you're banking that we might have some in stock. Wouldn't it be better to give me 10, 15% of your business? And then if you're ever in trouble, I can keep safety stock for you. Within 3 months, the competitor failed, and we took over the whole shop. So they became the second supplier.
Yeah, I think when you solve problems for people in a holistic and look at it from a long-term perspective, there's a lot more value to be gained than just, going after the quick sale. I hear like sales programs, all these sales programs talk about, 2-call close. You got to close in 2 calls. You got to well, that's great if you're selling, $50 widgets, $100 widgets, $250 widgets, but
even then it's not great. It's in my day, they called it kiss or kill. If they don't kiss you on the first attempt, kill it, go on to the next one. And it'd be a whole other podcast to talk about lead nurturing programs. But some of the greatest sales I've ever made started with a no, and continued to be a no until it wasn't a no anymore.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, I mean, our Fangled, my company, we convert every touch into an advocate. Anyone can sell something quickly, but to have that person who buys your product love the process, love the product, and shout it from the hilltops as your advocate is really what you want to do. There's no advertising that works better than word of mouth, and there's nothing cheaper to grow your business. So if you're truly understanding who your customer is and you're filling a need, you're solving, curing a pain, you're creating just this horde of brilliant people who love your product that will tell the world about it and continue to grow. That's what the strategy is about. I mean, tomorrow, if you and I wanted, we could open a store and sell really crappy stuff at a really cheap price and sell all of it. And next week, after everybody tries out whatever it was that we were selling and hates it, that would be the end of our game.
Yep.
So, and that's not sustainable. It's not ethical. It's not moral. And it certainly doesn't build advocates for the brand.
Yeah. So I think this sets us on a really good stage to shift the conversation a little bit and start talking about how do we start transitioning from that strategy conversation into getting into the nitty gritty and starting to identify tools and really, lay out the solution in a way that, makes them want to participate and continue on and not just take your knowledge to the competitor.
Sure. Well, once you've done who's your customer and truly understanding who they are, what their needs, all the things we've talked about, the second is really that competitive landscape. Who are the competitors in the market, including alternative products? For example, if you sell glue, other glues are competitors, but so is anything else that sticks something together. Tape is a competitor, nails, screws, all of the things that could resolve that problem is sort of the next step. And then looking at what you do as a company, your services, your products, and otherwise, how do you differentiate and best all of those alternatives that are in the market? So now you've sort of got this whole pool of information and data, and clarity starts to come out of that. So if you recognize, for example, that the biggest problem in your market is your competitors constantly are late, run out of product, or they have quality issues that cause for example, line shutdowns because the product isn't working or isn't working in their equipment. Whatever those differentiators are, those challenges that are causing the problems with the customer that you can solve, that then becomes what you want to talk about. And I've talked about this in other podcasts, but for example, I was in the steel drum industry on a project for years. Steel drums, not the musical kind, the kind that hold chemicals and coatings, 55 gallon. The ones that in the action movies, the guys somehow hide behind and they're bulletproof, which they're not. If you hide behind the barrel, you'll be safe. They're not. But the industry that I was working with, they were going to market. Their strategy was, our drums are made out of American-made steel that you could trace back to the factory that made it in case there's a problem. We can paint them in multiple colors. We do all of our testing in-house. All of the things that are table stakes. So there's no way you could be in that industry and not do all of those things. So we did a deep dive into the voice of customer. We talked to the top customers that had been loyal for years and customers that weren't that loyal. And we asked, why do you do business with this company? We dug in a little bit deeper than that, but the results were surprising. Nobody cared about the quality. They knew that the drum had to work because it's the law. They didn't care where the steel came from. They didn't care about any of that. What they cared about was when I called, they answered the phone. That was number one. Number two, when there's an issue for me, for example, the SKU3, which we don't use that often, we got to run on that product. I needed drums. I didn't have any in-house. They're the only guys that could get it to me within a few days as opposed to a month. Number three was when they goof, they take responsibility and they fix it. So basically, it was a customer service and customer experience and ease and personal touch was the reason. And we looked at the competitive landscape, and sure enough, the reason they all felt that way was because they'd been burned by all of the major competitors. So the entire marketing strategy was flexible manufacturing, shorter lead times, personal touch, and the company just blossomed and grew like crazy. Why? Because we found what the pain was. Mm-hmm. We started talking about how we're the only ones that can fix it. And there's much more to the story, but that's an example of how it came together.
Yeah, marketing strategy goes so much deeper than most people take into account for. And there's countless amount of tools and things out there that marketers use to really dive into that and really get those answers, beyond what our customers tell us, and I'm sure you've used survey tools and analytics that are all over the internet to discern what's, the landscape itself.
One of our key services is that qualitative and quantitative research, which rarely is a random survey. Because surveys, and this is something that people got to know about, these survey monkey things that go out, they're just touching your customer. There's no scientific use for the data that you're getting because you're really looking at just those that are willing to respond, which is either people who love you or hate you. Yep. And the information. The other thing is you cannot mathematically calculate on most of them because people are like, for example, if you were rating our company on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the greatest company you ever worked with, 1 being we suck. So people rate it. There's a 5, and this guy says an 8, and this guy says a 7. Those numbers are meaningless. You can't do an average of those numbers because one guy said 5, another one said 10. Does that mean the guy who said 10 is twice as happy with your service? You could say we got 80% of our responses are 9s, so that's good. That you can use. But really, being able to dig in and do focus groups and direct interviews with people to ask deep probing questions to get understanding, it's an art and a skill that very few are good at. We've got a team of folks who do it that are incredible to really dig in and understand what's below the surface you're never going to find from some survey monkey thing.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. The world of analytics is another mystery to a lot of people. And so you're absolutely right on the survey thing and scales of 1 to 10, right? The other side of that too is what was my mood when I took it?
Yep.
Right, because if I'm happy, I'm much more likely to rate service as a 10, even if it was a 7, than if I'm upset by something else. It doesn't even have to be related.
Yeah. Well, the scenario that we always talk about is, so at the end of a phone call with customer service, if you stay on the line and take this survey, we'd appreciate it. Well, somebody who just got regular survey, okay, I'm done. They hang up. Who stays on the line? Either somebody who was tickled fancy or someone who just wants blood. I talked to that idiot. He made me repeat the same thing 7 times. He couldn't spell my name. He couldn't resolve my problem. I'm so mad. And you get this crazy data. There's a gentleman that I worked with who was involved in the automotive industry for years. And now when you buy a car, the salespeople always sort of very shyly go, hey, when you get that survey, please fill it out. If you don't fill it out, they get penalized in their bonus. And if they don't get all 10s, it affects them. So even if it's a way they're used punitively for salespeople with many of the kind of budget car manufacturers out there, it's how they prevent giving bonuses to their people. Mm-hmm. So, and by the way, at the end of it, they always ask you, did the salesman tell you anything about the survey? Because if you say yes, then they get penalized. So it's not market research, it's crowd control.
It's a great way to look at it. Sir, the other thing that I think is really interesting with surveys is that very rarely do, I would say, in my experience, less than half of people actually put in comments that are actionable, that you could even remotely do anything with. So now you have all this data. Mm-hmm. And none of it's really actionable because it's just numbers, relative numbers on paper.
Yep. There's a hotel chain. I stopped staying at the hotel chain because every time I would stay, they would send me a survey I didn't want to fill out. And when I didn't fill it out, they would send it again. So if I've traveled to 5 cities in a week, which has happened, I would have 5 survey reminders every day for months until you fill it out. So I filled out all of them saying, your surveys cost you my business, and refused to stay at that chain anymore because I don't want to deal with it. And there's no way to turn off the surveys in their system. They don't give you an opt-out. Yep. It became a nuisance. And I said that, and blocking it doesn't help you because it comes from different sources. So I don't do business with them anymore. So, but back to building what we were talking about, the strategy side. So getting quality information, qualitative and quantitative, about your customers is really important in a way that you can relate it back to how you as a company can differentiate. And many times companies will find a niche that isn't being served, that they then adapt their business with their new marketing strategy to dominate that market.
Yep. It's, that's really what it comes down to is everybody, there's thousands of marketers, there's hundreds of screw manufacturers, there's hundreds of widget makers out there, and the reality is at the core of it, the product is pretty much the same. Mm-hmm. There's varying quality levels, obviously, but the core product offering is virtually the same. And so I think it's interesting you point out you have to find your niche within that space, solving a specific problem a specific way to really win at it.
Yep. I've seen deals in the industrial space where even though you were more expensive, you gave a guarantee of backstock for ebb and flow in manufacturing, and that was enough to get the business.
Yep.
That not only are we going to make sure that you deliver, you need 1,000 of these a week, you're going to have them in stock as you need them. We will back hold an extra 2,000 always, so that if something happens and you've got an increase or a decrease, we can cover it. There's a fastener company that actually puts vending machines on site. Mm-hmm. So, and what I mean by a vending machine is you're a guy who's got to supply these screws to the line, or you need special roll of tape every once in a while. It's in the machine. And when you open that door and you take it out, it automatically bills. Until you take it out of the vending machine, it's still the property of the supplier.
Yep.
It's expensive, but it's a solution. How much, if you're missing a roll of tape, and your production line is going to close for 3 hours while somebody goes and gets that roll of tape, it's not expensive at all.
Yep.
So
I've seen those in automotive shops as well. They're using them for different lubricants and oil and things like that now too. That to me is a really interesting tool because, like you said, you can set it up so that it's not billed until you actually physically pull it out of there. But also from an inventory control standpoint, from a business operations standpoint, that's just hugely powerful in my mind.
Yep, there's another similar tactic that exists, understanding the need. A small manufacturer that can't afford to have a full-time buyer.
Yep.
So a distributor of the components that they need steps in and says, if you provide me with your production schedule every week, we will guarantee that the items are there. So you won't have to have a buyer. All you got to do is we in our system will do what your buyer used to do and provide that service. That it's not free, but the upcharge you're going to be paying is still less expensive than a full-time employee, benefits. And by the way, we're a whole team of people, not just one. So you'll never have to worry about when your buyer goes on vacation.
Yeah.
So, there's all sorts of tactical moves that exist once you understand what your customers' needs are.
Yeah. I think it's really, again, everything boils down to what does my customer need? It's not what I need. It's not what I think. It's what my customer needs and what my customer thinks that really is the winning strategy. So,
And the other part of the strategy too is now your look, your feel, your graphics. I see so many companies that, they go online to like Upworks or Fiverr and they find a guy who can make a logo. And basically the logo is what I think is cool. Well, guess what? You're not your market. So there was a great story, and I wasn't involved, but my favorite graphics guy that I use for a lot of my projects had told me about that. There was a guy who was really into Dungeons and Dragons, and he owned an insurance company. So all of his materials and logo looked like dragons and ogres and King Arthur kind of looking stuff, and it turned off customers. It had nothing to do with insurance. There was no what is an insurance customer looking for their family. It was just this weird Dungeons and Dragons guy, and he thought it was cool. And the reference is, if we were tomorrow, although there's no more record stores really left in the world, if you and I were going to open up a record store and all we stocked was music we liked, how long would we be in business?
Well, considering I like pretty much anything that comes on vinyl, we could probably survive for a little while. But
for a little while, until some kid comes in who's looking for EDM music, or someone who wants the latest opera or classical, or all of those other things that make money that you may not be. It's kind of like, the controversy about people who own bakeries and they won't make cakes for certain types of events. And it's kind of like, all people eat cake. and what they do, what people are doing with those cakes when they take them home is their personal business. So just make a cake and sell it. And I just find that as a business person, very odd. Now, if I knew that there was a customer who was using something that I was selling for some sort of act of violence, I would have an issue with that.
Obviously, that's a different story. But it floors me when somebody says, I won't sell to this type of a customer. I won't sell to that type of a customer purely because, and we've seen this, and this is as far as I'm going to get into the politics of the day.
Yeah.
But we see this in political views. People are very strong one side or the other, and they say, well, I'm not going to deal with somebody on the other side, right? Yeah. And it's a very blinding view from a business perspective to be that short-sighted about it.
Yeah, and there's a line in that you could use so that nobody would cross it. I mean, for example, somebody comes into your store and you sell, I don't know, driveway markers for the snow, and a person comes in and says, if I sharpen the tip of this, can I kill somebody with it? Maybe in that case, you probably don't want to sell to that person. But other than that, it's interesting to me how, there are people you don't want to sell to because of other reasons.
Yep.
For example, in my background, which is mostly international trade prior to coming back to the States, the one thing that you learn is that in those tiny countries that do very little business with you is a company that will try to occupy more time of yours than you're profitable. And I'll give you an example. If you're selling an industrial product to a place like, say, Jamaica, or somewhere where there's not much industry, there is a maximum that you could possibly ever sell into that market. And if that maximum that's in the market, if you look at your total margin and profit, doesn't merit even paying for a plane ticket to go there to visit the customer, you have to take that into account. Yeah. You don't get glory by saying, oh, we're in 77 countries, but 2 of them spend $100 a year. If that's all you're getting out of it. So there are people you don't want to sell to for economic and other reasons.
Yep. Oh yeah, definitely. Let's get ready to wrap up here. I always like to wrap up my shows with final thoughts.
Sure.
So out of everything that we've talked about today, what's kind of 1 or 2 things that people should take away from this episode?
Strategy first. And always, as you're doing your business, take it to the final step. Is what I'm doing today turning people into advocates for my brand or preventing them from becoming advocates? Because if you can turn everyone into an advocate for your brand, your business is going to grow.
Awesome. Absolutely love that advice. It's fantastic advice. Where can people find you?
I'm right here. No, the best way to find me is on LinkedIn, Andrew Deutsch. If they're linked with you, they'll probably find me as a number 2. Feel free to send me a request, unless you're trying to push Bitcoin or multi-level marketing, then leave me alone. You can also go to my website. You can see here, www.fangledtech.com. And you can also check us out on YouTube at the Fangled Cast. Lots of interesting conversations there that could benefit your audience.
Awesome. Well, I definitely appreciate your time. I appreciate everybody that hopped on the live show here. As always, the recorded versions of the show will hit YouTube and all the major podcast networks on Thursday at 1 p.m. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful evening.
Well, that wraps up yet another episode of the Winning Tactics Podcast. You can find Adam on both the LinkedIn and Facebook platforms. And to support the show and ensure the success of the podcast, would you kindly consider visiting Patreon.com/Adam Sinkus? We greatly appreciate it. And until next time, from the Winning Tactics Podcast, remember, culture is how your team behaves when no one is looking. Take good care, and thanks for listening.